All right, so now we are recording and we will wait. We already have 5 people in so far. So I will wait for everybody else to get on. We have I think maybe 100 and something people coming in today. So I will wait very patiently for everyone, and then I'll get started with ground rules and introductions and all of that fun stuff. Turn on the closed captioning too. Okay.
Usually you can see their images pouring in here right now.
Well, this is a webinar, and so that there are no pictures of people. So it's just you guys talking, and then they use their chat option to ask the questions, or they raise their hand. So it's a little bit different than the
Previous
live
one.
talks that we have, the meeting talks.
Fewer distractions on the screen for one thing.
Exactly. Yeah. No interruptions, just you 3 and me. Sounds
It's
like
a little dull. It's a little bit dull.
Remember, we're being recorded.
I know. I'm being
we have some
today.
post editing we can do.
No,
right.
I'm just I love to be with people. I find this sterile sort of like
so
by yourself or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give everyone about 3 more minutes and then we're going to get started. Okay, so just for the attendees that are on right now, we are just waiting for people to come through and join us on here. People that maybe are a little bit late, but give them a grace period for joining us. But welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and you know, we're going to get some really great knowledge today and be able to ask experts in the field of misophonia questions that, you know, maybe we don't have access to them all the time, but today we do. So always a fun thing to do. Okay. And I'm a dead air kind of guy, so I feel like I just keep talking. Yeah, a chat already. Welcome. Okay. Hi, Trish. Trish, as we get started, I'm going to give the explanation of how it's going to run today. We do have a list of questions that we had submitted before, but you can always ask more questions in the webinar chat. So if you go to the bottom, you'll see that there's a chat option there. So you can put your questions in there as we progress through this. If that was your question. 1 minute. All right. Well, I'm just going to go, just for time's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. So, welcome everyone to our January Misophonia Symposium. Want to welcome you guys all here. Wonderful safe space that we continue to create for people that have misophonia, family of people that have misophonia, or professionals that work with misophonia. But I wanted to thank you guys and welcome you guys all to the quarterly symposiums. So my name is Nate Johnson. You guys have maybe seen me around. I do a lot of the tech work and a lot of the video work for the Misophonia Association. I also have misophonia, which makes it easy for me to understand, you know, what everyone's going through. So I'm in it with all of you. I'm going to kind of lay out the ground rules first, because this is a webinar that there's going to be, it's not necessarily the normal ground rules that we have for the attendees, but for our panelists, they're not going to drink on screen. They're not going to do things that can trigger misokinesia. And so this is a very safe space for people that have misophonia and misokinesia. I want to kind of give a little information for the Misophonia Association, just for some upcoming things. We are planning our annual conference right now with a couple of different places in mind: Pennsylvania, New Mexico, maybe North Carolina. So if you guys have any places that you guys want to recommend, please make sure to put them in the chat, because we do take all of this stuff into account when we're planning all of our conferences. The Misophonia Association is an association that is a nonprofit. They run the Misophonia Convention every year, along with donating money for research and continuing the education about misophonia. What else am I missing? I think that's
Video.
Yep. And so, yeah, as I said before, my name is Nate. I run the videos for the Misophonia Association. So we do all the recordings. Along with that, if you like these kind of live talks, we do have a membership program. I can put all of these links in the chat, where we talk with experts every single month, along with access to all of the videos that have ever been created since 2012. So if you guys are interested in that, I can make I can put a link in there so you can go and check it out. But for further ado, I'm going to give it over to the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do and who they are.
Who would you like to go first, Nate?
You go ahead. First one.
Okay, welcome everybody. It's so exciting to see you here on a Saturday morning. My name is Marcia Johnson, Dr. Johnson. I'm an audiologist located in Portland, Oregon. I opened a tinnitus and hyperacusis clinic in 1997. So this will be my 25th year working with people that have misophonia, although I had a different name for it then. They started appearing immediately in my clinic because they were diagnosed with hyperacusis. So I've been heavily involved with this for 25 years. And in 2013, working with other professionals, we founded the Misophonia Association. And we are here to help everyone with education, research, awareness, advocacy, and support. And we have tried really hard. Now, this will be our 10th year this fall. Tried very hard to bring the latest information. And we go and do these patient conventions, which we've had all over the country, and we hope you'll come. We are completely nonprofit. We have all volunteer group, except for our wonderful office manager, Polly Burns. And your donations and your continued support mean a lot to us. And we have tried to remain ground zero, sort of neutral. We've welcomed anyone who has experience with misophonia to come and tell what they know. And we've compiled, it's a huge amount of data. So I'm very proud of our work, as you can tell, and of our volunteer board, which includes Dr. Cindy Simon, audiologist, Dr. Jolene Jaffe, psychotherapist. Troy Reisdorf has been a community member. Now we've just recently added John Smoot as a board member. And in the past, we've had help from Chris Edwards, and other people have come to help us on our journey. None of us are experts in the field of how you run nonprofit associations, but I think we've done quite well. And I'm so excited to have again an in-person convention. Looks like it's going to be the first weekend of November. Now, in my clinic, I just want to mention what I am as an audiologist. I provide rehabilitative auditory sciences kinds of services for people with misophonia, which includes the use of devices that flood your auditory system with stimulation. And that's my primary tool. But having seen thousands and thousands of people with misophonia over 25 years, I have acquired quite a body of knowledge, and I'm always happy to share that wherever I can. So I want to thank you for coming, and let's hear from our other two friends. Let's go with Dr. J there.
The other Dr. J. I'm Dr. Jalene Jaffe. I've been working with the Misophonia Association. I was one of the co-founders, I guess. I've presented at every one of the conventions that we've had to date. I am a psychotherapist in Southern California and online all over the place. I've seen hundreds and hundreds, and I don't know how many people, hundreds of people with misophonia over these years of all ages. And I have evolved a program that combines a number of different approaches. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the most common thing that therapists know about. I found that was not sufficient. It was good, but not adequate for what I thought people needed. And so I've evolved a program that includes many other modalities and approaches: neuroscience, dialectical behavior therapy, media, arts, all sorts of things woven together to create a multidimensional program that helps people manage misophonia until such time as there are magic, take a pill, wave a magic wand, and everything goes away. So between now and then, I have a lot of tools to help people. And that, I think, is all I'm going to say right now. So on to Samantha.
Hello, welcome. My name is Samantha Bookman, and I am also a psychotherapist in the Southern California area. I work with clients online, and fortunately, people that are out of state, I provide misophonia consultation and coaching. So I am able to see people all over the world, which is fantastic. And I came into this, I've been a licensed therapist since 2006, but I came into the misophonia world really because we found out that our youngest child had misophonia and was really struggling. Additionally, our oldest child and my husband have misophonia as well. So I live with, all three people I live with have misophonia, if you can imagine what that's like. And I was really desperate as a parent and as a therapist. I thought, I have to figure out, there's no cure, and I have to figure out how to be able to help my children and my family. And so I dug in to the research and watched a bunch of old videos from the association and contacted, Dr. Jaffe was so helpful to me, and Dr. Johnson and others who are doing this work. And I guess maybe it was 8 or 9 years ago, I actually was running a parent support group for people with misophonia. And I didn't even know my kids had it yet, ironically. I just knew about it because of my husband, and nobody else had heard of it. So I've been doing this work for a while, and now it's the majority of what I do. And my approach is very much what I would call whole person approach, right? So it's really taking a look at the individual and all of the things going on in their life that affect how we're doing overall and how our nervous system is functioning. And I've had a lot of success in helping people feel better, function better, reduce their symptoms, and have more peace, which is what my website is called. My website is morepeaceful.com because that's the goal. So that's it. I'm excited you guys are here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all three of you guys, for your introduction. Yeah, so much wealth and knowledge between all three of you guys. I just wanted to kind of go through, the chat is not the way that the questions are asked in the webinars. So if you guys have questions, there is a Q&A option here. The panelists will be able to see the Q&A and answer the questions that they would like to answer. But please feel free to use that to ask any additional questions. We do have a whole list of questions that we have today from you guys previous to this. So I'm going to start with asking those questions and then kind of go through those as well as your live questions as well. So thank you for the introduction, you three. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the first question. This is with the relationships. So either all three of you guys can answer or one at a time, but how to bring up misophonia when dating someone in your 30s?
Well, I'll step in as an audiologist. This is probably the lesser part of my professional life, but it's just a question that does come up all the time. They get concerned about who to tell and how to tell. And Dr. Jaffe has had several good presentations on this topic, but at some point, what I know is it is important to tell. I'll remember a story of this 55-year-old woman that never married because of misophonia. And somehow in her 50s, she met this guy that head over heels. She did not know how to tell him. She didn't tell him. After they got married, all of a sudden these things arose because she had to sleep with her head on the foot of the bed on the pillow by his feet. And she would never sit down with him and eat. And he was developing some questions for her after they were married about her behavior. And finally, a psychologist helped her meet him at a session, and she was able to tell him. And the point of that story is that he was so relieved to find out what was going on. He cried because he was fine with accommodating anything she wanted. He just didn't understand her behavior, and he thought she was mad at him all the time. So once they cleared the air and they communicated about it, they went on and they're still happily married 15 years later, and they have figured it out.
I jump in on that and say, so I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist for 40 something or other years. And I've worked with, excuse me, a lot of people who have this issue at whatever age. I think kind of like any other major issue in somebody's life, you don't necessarily start out. The first thing you say when you meet somebody is, I was horrendously abused and I'm an alcoholic and whatever. You don't start with that. You start with some common ground, find out if this person is someone you're comfortable talking with, you want to spend more time with, give yourself a little while to get to the point where you think it's worth going deeper, and then approach the subject in a gentle way where it's not blaming the other person. You're not saying you're doing anything wrong. That thing you do that drives me crazy is not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. I just happen to have a neurological system that has a reaction to that. So I'm hopeful we can work around that and find ways to be together. And if that person is not willing to consider that, then they're not going to be a good match. And I know lots of people who end up getting married, having families, and they work it out.
Yeah, I think those are great reflections. I think the other thing I've had people do is use some online resources. So being able to say, here's a little bit of information about this. SoQuiet.org has these little cards that they'll send people for free that just have a little description. So I think focusing on the medical nature of this, right? That this is a disorder. It's not a pet peeve, right? It's not me being difficult. This is a condition that I have. And I think it sort of can really be a barometer in starting a relationship, right? So in other words, the way that the person responds, right? How comfortable you feel telling the person, and then also how they respond can give you a lot of information about the relationship or the potential of the relationship, right? So if you were asking for anything, right? If you were saying, you know, that you have, you know, some anxiety with driving, or right, that that you have some special, you know, dietary needs, whatever the issue might be, you know, the way that the person's going to respond to those will really give you a good piece of information about how safe you feel in the relationship and the kind of person they are. And if I've worked with people who really can't get themselves to bring it up, that brings up some sort of deeper stuff about maybe how secure and confident you're feeling in yourself, which is definitely something that a therapist can help with, so that you can get to a more secure place, so that you do feel safe and comfortable and worthy, right, of saying, these are my needs, and asking for support and respect.
Those are such great answers. I thought of one more thing, which is 3/4 of people with misophonia are female. 3/4. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of women, female patients coming into our clinics, and they have told me over the years that they have pretty good standards for dating people. They have some particular needs, and they don't usually express them, but they go through a lot of fish in the sea before they find a keeper. And one of the things they've told me is when they go out with somebody, they always pay attention to, there's so many oral facial issues with misophonia. I mean, that's really a central theme in our work. And so they're paying really close attention to how these people behave on a first or second date. And then if they have some, you know, habits that are not up to standard, let's say, they're going to be busy from now on. They're busy. They can't go out again. So I always think of this sea of men trying to date these women, that they go out, they're having a good time, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, sorry, I'm washing my hair. Can't see you anymore. And I think they must be somewhat mystified by why they were rejected, or, you know, I do have a little sympathy for them, but I know that the misophones like to find people that they feel comfortable with. Does that make sense? Yeah.
They can't chat, but yes, that makes sense for me too. My wife of 10 years, used to bring her a lot of glasses of water when we first started to date. She just thought I was really polite. Speaking of feeling comfortable, we have a question for coping in the environment, which is, what is the best housing situation? And I'm going to kind of couple a couple of these questions before, because they're talking about, we don't mention triggers here, but housing situation in terms of external triggers outside of their home, as well as I'm going to keep it for inside the home as well, if you guys want to touch on that as well, in terms of sitting at the dining table and spending intimate time with your family. So I'm going to do kind of both external triggers and internal triggers in the household.
The external triggers are a problem for a lot of people. You move somewhere, you're living in this house or apartment, and there are things that are unavoidable. There are going to be neighbors who do things that are upsetting, and they're going to be construction, kids outside, whatever it is. There are going to be a lot of things you cannot control. And I think one of the most important things to do is to get clear about what you can or cannot do anything about. If you're going to get screaming and yelling fits about things you actually can't fix, you're going to just drive yourself crazy. So think more toward what you can do about it. Put in double pane glass windows, build in some soundproofing, probably not practical to move every time there's something going on outside. So calming yourself down and finding other ways to engage your attention. We can't pay attention to everything at the same time. So pay attention to anything else than that thing that's bothersome to you. And as far as the indoor part of it, there are a lot of ways to work around the family matters. Allow people to eat separately if that's what they need, or to have music on or ambient noise, a waterfall, a fan, TV on in the background. Eat sequentially, serially, rather than all at the same time. So you can have family time together at the table, but the person who has misophonia doesn't have to listen to everybody else eat because they already did, or they're going to later after this person's through. So you get the family time at the table without the food being a factor. So that's another way around it. Many other ideas, but let's just start with that.
I have found that, for all of these things, right? I think Dr. Jaffe said that well, that we have to first establish what we can control and what we can't, right? So things like outside of the house noises fall usually into the category of things we can't control. So then, and if finances allow you to make any sort of accommodations, that's great. But I've worked with a lot of people where they're in an apartment or, that they can't invest. So what I work with people on is really figuring out, like I said before, what's going on overall. Because what I have found is that, right, the misophonia is there, right? We know that it exists, it's there, it's not going away. And so the question is, why is it sometimes expressed, as a 10 out of 10, and sometimes it's a 5 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10, and as far as your level of suffering. And so what I work with people on is how to assess what's going on in their life overall, what's going on with their whole being, including their relationship, their community, their job, their health, all of these different parts, and then how the misophonia interacts with that. Because what I have found is that if people are able to take really good care of themselves and address any underlying things, so address any underlying anxiety and address any stressors, happening in their workplace, or self-esteem matters, or conflict in a relationship, as we address those things and the person's nervous system can settle a bit, that the misophonia becomes, it lessens in a way that we can then work with it, right? It doesn't go away. It's not as if we say, okay, well, if your relationships are all healthy and strong and, you have great self-esteem, then you're not going to have misophonia, right? That would be fantastic. But it settles down in a way that then we can work with it, and then we can have some tools and strategies to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do when I'm having a really hard time with some noise that I'm hearing from outside my house. So that's sort of my overall approach that I've had a lot of success with. And then as far as inside the house, I think, the way that I work with that is first starting with what the individual suffering with misophonia wants. So there are different things, right? I work with a lot of people who say, I want to be able to eat with my family. That's really important to me. I miss that, or I feel left out. And then there are a lot of people who say, I don't want to at all. And so we have to start there and start with what is the individual's goal. And then we work from there. So then we decide, right? We sort of differentiate times when I need to really take good care of my body and start from a place of safety. So that might be using the type of devices that Dr. Johnson mentioned, or any of the strategies that Dr. Jaffe talked about, right? Times when I just need to be away from these triggers and feel safe. And then we talk about, are there other times when a person might want to practice with some tools and strategies, not just toughing it out, right? We don't want to do that. But with some skillful practice, a person might want to practice little bits at a time. And so getting closer and closer to the hard situation. So it might be, I've had people that start with standing in the hallway for a few minutes and practicing their self-soothing strategies and their calming their nervous system as they're getting closer to the family dinner. And they do it on their terms, little tiny bits at a time. And again, not just toughing it out. I have found that backfires, but really being intentional about the practice so that they can build up tolerance to do the thing that they want to do. And again, that's only if that's their goal. If that's not where they're at and that's not a priority to them, then they can have family time at a time that doesn't involve a meal. So that's sort of my overall how I work with people and how I approach it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask a question, a live question now. Yes. Oh, you're muted. If you're trying to say something, Dr. Johnson, you're
Okay.
muted.
I want to turn with that question. I would like to turn with that question about housing and how it affects us.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm like completely vitally interested in architecture and arrangements. And I take this question quite literally. And Jolene will tell you for about 5 years, I keep coming up with, I want a contest at the convention where people bring designs for homes for people with misophonia, communities for people with misophonia, options. We have many thoughts about people in wheelchairs, for example, or other issues, right? You design these homes. Why can't we design a home for people who have misophonia? One of my big, I spend quite a bit of time with patients on this issue because many of them live in these more modern homes that have these terrible things called great rooms, which serve as an acoustic amplifier for the entire household when the kitchen, living, and dining are one big giant space, and the corridors that run down toward the bedrooms are like ear canals that convey noise right down the hallway to the rooms. So we speak a lot about this with my patients on reconfiguring the home, setting up different situations and amending the home structures. The person with misophonia might end up with a bedroom that's furthest away from these noise producing areas, or even the garage conversion or a tiny house in the backyard. There are many creative things we can come up with creating quiet zones or buffered zones, or what I call sound oases, where the room is full of fish fountains, fans, Alexas that play different sounds. Again, it's very challenging for misophones to listen to, say, the murmuring of a television they can't quite make out. This is one of the biggest complaints with people who live together. There are certain things that just trigger them, and we don't want to name a lot of them, I know, but they're real. This is a real concern. I've had many patients come to my clinic who are ready to move. Several situations, one where the local airplane runway path switches 6 months to the south, 6 months to the north. They didn't know it when they bought the house because they bought it when it was going the other way. The neighbor installed a huge heat pump that's right next to the bedroom, runs off and on all night. These things are very difficult to handle, and I want to acknowledge that for everybody. The thought, however, my caution to you all is, do not believe that moving to the country will take you into this idyllic, quiet zone. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with who have moved to the country and they have found out that agriculture is extremely noisy, constantly noisy. So be careful if you decide to move. I think old-fashioned houses with rooms that are separate with doors that close are better. I think they're better than these big open noise machines that are very popular, and they look beautiful, but it's really hard to live in. So I think this is a real issue. Yes, I would put sound generating machines on your ears, and you can flood your system with every sound. So all 70,000 auditory fibers are busy. They're not able to pick up and listen to these noxious triggers. So I'm very pragmatic in my advice to patients. I'm very thoughtful about it. I would love to see this contest get off the ground. Don't you think it would be fun to look at designs people submit? Little children have sent me designs of their house, which is like, looks like an octopus with long arms, with at the end there's a living space, and the center has a place you can go if you want. So there's some very creative people out there. If you're listening, please start thinking about this, and let's create some plans.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I missed you on that one. Yeah, Alexas, fans, all great things. This question, I don't know if you might have the answer for it, but I know that we have had a talk in the past, which is 23andMe reports indicating genetic markers. Do you want to answer any of those? Because I can also link to the video that we had from last year about 23andMe.
Yeah, I think we should just do a brief summary on that one, but it is fascinating because they've put that out there for many years. And the fact is, when they first did it, everyone in our group was quite concerned about them just saying all of a sudden you have mesophonic markers, because nobody else knew about that. And then this person came and kind of explained it. And I felt like the explanation was they had done some questionnaires for people. Somehow they identified who might have misophonia or who did, and then they noticed this genetic marker, and so they sort of associated the two, because I don't think yet we have clinical data in a professional peer-reviewed journal on that issue, but people get excited about it. I mean, they feel happy, I think, that somebody's recognized something. Do you have more information, Jolene or Samantha, on that?
I only have anecdotal information that my husband's says that he has the genetic marker, and so does mine. And it's interesting because I don't have misophonia. So it's interesting to us that both of our kids do. And so I have a question mark about that, right? So if both parents are carriers, right, then how does that play a role? I'm not sure. I've worked with a lot of clients who have gotten the 23andMe test and it is positive for them. So they've got something, because, none of my friends or family who don't have misophonia have had it come up positive. So I don't know.
We do know that misophonia has a genetic link. That's been apparent since the 90s with me, because I'd see parents coming in with their kid and one of their kids had misophonia. So we're twins that both had it. I mean, I know we know instinctively, I think there's a genetic link, but I guess we'll find out more as we go along. And again, Nate, if you could just link to that wonderful presentation, and people that are curious can go join up the club there for a few dollars a month, and they can go and look at that and listen to the person that came from that organization.
Yeah, exactly. It was a great talk. I did have two of you presenters wanted to answer a question. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read it out loud. It was the next one on here. How common is it for people to have feelings of unwanted sexual arousal upon hearing trigger sounds? This began with me when I was 9 years old, and I have no idea why. It has caused extremely shameful feelings over the past 45 years.
I would love to dive in on that one. This is one of the trigger reactions that people feel most shame about and most uncomfortable about, and not as frequently discussed. I mean, when we talk about triggers and reactions, most commonly people are talking about the other kinds of things, the things that happen at the dinner table, and the reactions being anger or frustration or meltdowns, that sort of thing. This is another way the neurological system deals with things that set it off. It's an uncomfortable sensation, and yet it is not uncommon. It doesn't get discussed as much. I have talked to some people who have worked with, I don't to get into detail about this, but who've worked with neurologists and neurologists who are involved with women's genital systems, who are finding ways to somehow address this. So it can be managed to some degree. It's a very unpleasant sensation, and it is not anything that you are doing by intent. So I think shame is a big topic, no matter what it is we're talking about. Shame is a sense that you're doing something bad, or that you are somebody bad, there's something wrong with you. If you can get around that one and just say, look, this is something that's happening and we need to figure out what to do about it, if there's anything we can do about it, and put the shame piece of it aside.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was well said. I think there, that again, it just has to do with the nervous system reacting in situations where it feels threatened and unsafe. And there are other situations that are well known about, right, where the body can respond with unwanted sexual arousal. So that's not uncommon at all. And so it's not surprising on some level that it happens with misophonia as well. And it really isn't uncommon. It definitely is not the top 5, responses to triggers, but it's definitely on there. I've worked with it quite a bit. And of course there's shame, right? Because it feels like that's not something that, people have shame about feeling angry or rageful as well. But that even more so. And so I would just say that, right, that there certainly doesn't need to be any shame. I wouldn't say there shouldn't be, because there are a lot of cultural messages that we get that would make somebody feel ashamed. So it totally makes sense. And at the same time, it's really unfair, because these things that are happening in the person's body, right? We know from the studies that people don't have control over what's happening with their breathing or their muscle tightness or their heart rate or their perspiration, right, when they're triggered. And sexual arousal falls in the same category. So it certainly isn't anything anybody is doing, or, they're not trying to feel that way. And because it's unwanted, just like the anger and the rage and the frustration, it is incredibly frustrating and can be shameful, because we want to feel like we're in control of our emotions and our reactions. And that's not always the case. And so I would just encourage people to reach out and ask for support and help, because there are some of us therapists out there doing that work, and people that can help you figure out how to reduce the symptom a bit, and also deal with the feelings that come up around it.
I'm also up to speed with this one, because it started coming up a long time ago. I noted it along with all the other unusual symptoms that I was experiencing as an audiologist, trying to work with people's hearing. You're a long way from the ear down there, and yet people were commenting. And so from a physiologic point of view, what it has done for me, you remember back from your anatomy day, you have 12 sets of cranial nerves. Most of them stay in your head because they innervate your sensory systems, but several of them travel all the way down through your body, through your neck, and they operate your heart, your lungs, your diaphragm, your intestines, also way down into your gut, into your base, down with your reproductive organs. And the most famous one is the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve. And the vagal nerve turns out to be very connected to a lot of different things in our bodies. And there's a lot of work going on in vagal nerve stimulation and therapy for people that have auditory conditions, for example. So there is a physiologic connection in your brain. And the other physiologic fact you should know is that they have discovered, for example, it used to be thought that your auditory nerves only went from your brainstem area to your ear and back again and up into your brain. But it turns out that they actually travel down your spinal cord up to 4 feet long. And this is a fascinating thing where you've got sound impulses. I think it's one of the reasons why people like to go to these concerts and jump around to drum sounds, and they feel it in their bodies. And, it's kind of an amazing thing, vibrating in your chest and your bones. So these two factors need to be taken into account and thought of when you're exploring misophonia. And I hope somebody takes up this topic in a research grant soon. But I would wonder, again, I wonder if the vagal nerve is down lower in the brain. It's indicating to us where misophonia lives in your body, in your brain. This is a neurological situation, and I personally suspect that It's lower down in the amygdala, and the areas that Dr. Kumar Sukhbinder and his crew are looking at. The evidence seems to point to a low level brainstem type something at some point. And I think they're going to find out eventually that it's the vagal nerve that's helping you out there in an unwanted way. That's just my suspicions. That's Marcia Johnson's wonderings after 25 years.
Perfect.
Real thing. And it annoys people. They don't like it. Yeah.
So in terms of finding solutions and treatment options, what do you guys think of exposure therapy? Is this a good idea? She has an 11-year-old and they're seeing a therapist who is suggesting exposure therapy. So your guys' thoughts on that one?
I can jump in here. So like I said a few minutes ago, right? So I think what happens here is that well-meaning practitioners who don't know anything about misophonia are using the bag of tricks that they have for other disorders, and they're hoping and assuming that they will help for misophonia. Unfortunately, they make it much, much worse. So, like I was explaining before, right? Because there are disorders that we treat as psychotherapists where exposure is the right thing to do, and it's not with misophonia. So, what I talk to people about is, right, so it's sort of the analogy that I use is it's pushing somebody into the deep end when they can't swim versus starting them on the steps with a floaty, right? So we don't want to push people in the deep end when they don't know how to swim. That's going to cause trauma, right? That's gonna hijack their nervous system completely and can make things much, much worse. So what we do instead, I mean, my main goal, right? I started this work as a parent. And so my goal was to have my children live in the world and not feel like a victim of misophonia. So I want them to be able to live their lives however they want and to feel safe in the world and to know that they can take care of themselves, even with misophonia. And so what that looks like is we start in the shallow end, we start with a swim instructor, we start very slowly, right? And we only start, right, little bits at a time. And so, like I said, if it is the person's desire to sit at the dinner table, right, then we work on that tiny bits at a time. If it's the person's desire to be able to be in class without having other students bother them or at the workplace, or sometimes the kid is okay because it's working for them, right? Screaming at people or, you know, refusing is working for them. And so then it's the parent's goal, and we'll work on how to set boundaries in such a way that the kid can practice little bits at a time, so that that we build up to things and that we're doing it in a way that feels safe. And the person has some skills and some abilities, because again, misophonia is a hijacking of the amygdala, right? The fight or flight center of the brain. So if we just jump, if we push them in the deep end, what's going to happen to their fight or flight center, right? It's going to be on even more overdrive than it was before, right? Panic, panic, panic. And so that's the last thing we want to do. Instead, we want to give the person strategies, tools, ways to calm their nervous system and their body before they even put their toe in the water. And then they can do it in a way that feels safe and reassuring, and that's going to help them build tolerance and learn some confidence so that they can do it in a way that's healthy and productive.
I think that analogy of the swimming pool is very good. It helps people understand things. Another way that I explain why I don't recommend exposure therapy is if you were allergic, if your child were allergic to bee stings, to bees, and they'd go into anaphylactic shock when they get a bee sting, would you put them in a room full of bees and say, okay, get used to it? Or if they have a severe peanut allergy, would you keep peanuts in the house that might send them to the emergency room? No, you would not. So misophonia is not an allergy. You're not allergic to these sounds. However, if you think of it like that, it's a way of understanding why it might not be the best idea to go and just expose your child to sounds that are going to do everything that Samantha just said about setting off the neurological system. There is an approach that one of our colleagues uses where sounds that are difficult for the person are introduced in tiny, tiny amounts, sort of the toe in the water, and it's well covered up with music or peaceful thoughts or whatever, and then that sound is supposed to build up over time. That's the only version of this that has, in my thinking, any potential usefulness at all, and even that is not something that I personally suggest.
You're
Thanks.
muted. Oh.
Samantha, I have one word for you about exposure therapy for misophonia, and that is run. You're in the hands of somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. They might be the nicest people in the world, I don't care, but they don't know what they're doing. They haven't done their homework. They don't understand misophonia. And the reason we know this is because we have 25 years of reported data from people who have had that happen to them. We know from the source, people who have misophonia, who were subjected to hours and hours of this auditory torture that didn't help them, and they were forced to go. And I hate to tell you this, all you listeners, and from now into the future, you have to be extremely careful who you choose to work with. You just do. You have an unusual thing, doesn't follow anybody's set rules of what they can do for it. And a lot of people that have misophonia spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing ridiculous treatments that are aimed at other problems like vestibular disorders or other things. I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, but I just can tell you that people get desperate and they will buy into somebody that tells them if, I just had a patient yesterday, a therapist said they had to brush their arms with a hairbrush every 2 hours around the clock, and this was going to fix their misophonia. And they were questioning whether they should be taking their 14-year-old daughter to this person, and they didn't understand how they were going to brush her arms with a hairbrush every 2 hours around the clock. And I was looking at them, listening, and I'm just like, doesn't that seem like nuts to you? Doesn't that just, I'm an old country girl here. It just doesn't make sense to me how that's going to fix your misophonia. So, run away from those people. Go to the people that have some experience with misophonia and participate in the great experiment, which we're all in, but don't do the stuff that's been shown to be useless, and certainly don't spend money for it. That's my frank opinion.
Worse than useless, I think, though. It's harmful. It often makes it worse, and it certainly makes that person averse to seeing a therapist, because look what therapists do.
As somebody with misophonia, 100%. Oh, do you want to talk, Samantha?
I was just going to say, I could not agree more. I always tell my clients, if somebody says they're going to cure your misophonia, turn and run in the other direction. I've worked with many, many teenagers who've been taken to practitioners who said they were going to cure their misophonia. Parents spent tons and tons of money, borrowed money, and it is way worse than useless, because the child leaves feeling completely hopeless and really damaged. They feel like, I'm broken and nobody can fix me. And the problem, like Dr. Jaffe just said, is that then that person is going to be really skeptical about receiving any type of treatment or help. And so, you're digging yourself out of a hole. It doesn't mean it's too late, but it's definitely a good idea to steer clear of anybody who says they have a magic wand for this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've tried it, hate it, don't want to do it anymore. So I have two questions. One, I don't know if they, do you guys do, I don't know if you guys would be able to answer a question for an occupational therapist. Is that something that you guys want to try?
No, I think we shouldn't. It's a
Okay.
different field, and it's brand new. In the field of misophonia, we've just started working with one person that is bringing some points of view. And so from what I can tell, what they're using is other people's methods for misophonia. Most of them, they're buying or training in programs which are very suspiciously close to exposure therapy, which is called like this auditory integration type therapies. There's a program where they're having people listen to certain sound things as a retraining exercise for a few minutes. I think it's a field that's just beginning. I know they're interested. We want to support them, and we will support them, but we have a ways to go, I feel personally.
Okay, well, I'm going to go on to Aaron. Aaron had two questions, so I'm going to go on to the second one, which is, can you explain to me why my child's misophonia is much worse during the morning versus the rest of the meals during the day? We do not have her eat breakfast separately from the family. Or we do have her eat breakfast separately from the family.
Why not?
She's talking about for the day, so it's worse in the morning than it is during the afternoon and the evening.
So my first question would be if they're eating other meals together or not. But what I would say is the thing with misophonia is, right, it's always there. The issue is how it's expressed. Like I said, is it expressed at a 2 or a 6 or an 8 or a 10, right? Like how is it showing up? And what I have found is that has 100% to do with how the person is doing in general in that moment. So what does that mean? It means that anything that is going to affect the nervous system is going to affect misophonia. So if a child is more stressed, or an adult too, right? This applies to everybody. If a person is more stressed, more tired, more hungry, overwhelmed, anxious, right? Any and all of those factors will cause the misophonia expression to be greater. So what I would say is, and relationships are included in that, right? How we're feeling in a particular relationship. And so what I would say is, if the child, did they say it's much worse in the morning?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's not uncommon. I mean, it goes both ways. I work with families where it's much worse in the morning, and a lot of people it's much worse at night. But whatever's going on for that child in the morning, right? So how are they feeling in the morning? Is it a rush? Is it hard to get that child up out of bed? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they stressed about school? Are they stressed about something with a friendship? Are they having a hard time, right? So is the parent stressed and overwhelmed and trying to rush the kids out the door? And what are the other factors going on is what I would want to pay attention to, and then go from there.
I would take a more pragmatic point of view at this. Some people are morning people. Some people are not. Some people like quiet time in the morning. They want to do a gentle entry into this day and this world. Other people are bouncing up at 5 o'clock. Well, I don't understand why the kids just can't have breakfast by themselves. Who cares? I mean, I'm not a big proponent of forcing kids to sit at tables. As a matter of fact, it's one of my main themes. I tell families when they come in, it's a huge issue for people. It's huge. You're going to sit around a table. You're going to put things into this orifice in your face. And that's like a ritual of regularity, must have. And I've talked to them about other cultures where men and women don't eat together, where kids eat separately or later. There's lots of approaches to this model. I wouldn't put my eggs all in the basket of, why can't she sit with us at breakfast? Maybe she just doesn't feel like it. She's a person. Even if she's 3 years old, you figure out really soon your children have personalities. So to me, I would focus with that family on, so what? She can eat lunch and dinner. I would be jumping up and down, clapping my hands. So would a lot of other families. They would be thrilled that that child could join in, because some children and adults can never join in. So sometimes this becomes an issue. We should talk about it. We should have the "Why do we eat together" symposium. Why is that so critically important? And the adults feel like their feelings are hurt if the kids are not at the table. Where does that come from? That's not true in all cultures.
Jolene, do you want to? Okay. Oh.
I'm busy typing
Oh,
answer
you're fine.
to
Yeah.
questions.
I know. Thank you so much for answering that. Jolene has been answering all of your questions on the chat as well. So thank you very much for taking that on.
So no, I'll just sit with whatever those two folks said is very useful.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, how do I talk about triggers with my husband without him taking offense or getting defensive, I guess. This is new to him. And I will tell you, with my wife, we have a trigger word. So my word is Chewbacca. And so she always knows if I say Chewbacca, that means that I'm starting to feel the anxiety bubbling up in my throat. So I'll let you guys go into that one, but I wanted to just throw in that anecdote.
That's great. I would say, first of all, one of the first things that I advise parents as well as partners is, as much as this feels personal, when somebody yells at you and tells you to shut up because that thing you're doing is disgusting or whatever, it's very hard not to take it personally, but it isn't personal. It has to do with the sound. It has to do with coming from someone where I've told you 1 billion times and you're still making that sound. What is wrong with you? You're not a nice person to me, and things like that. So it's got a lot of emotional things wrapped up in it. However, if the person that all this is being thrown at can think about being, I think of it as being Teflon rather than Velcro. Somebody is throwing those attacks at you. They're angry at you. Let it slide off. It is not you, it's the sound. And let it slide off, let it go, take a breath, calm yourself down, wait till the other person calms down too.
So my experience is that, right, I only have my experience, which is being married to somebody with misophonia. And for me, that strategy hasn't really worked. I feel like, we all have our nervous system, which is sensing threats, right? And so if my husband's nervous system is sensing threat because of a noise I'm making, that's certainly not his fault and not in his control. But if he responds in a way that feels like he's mad at me, right, my nervous system then is going to react, right? And so the thing that I have learned and that I work on, because I do see couples as well, is that we have to work on everybody trying to reduce harm, right? So what does that mean? I work on that with couples and families. Like, how do we reduce harm? And that means it goes in all directions. So as a person without misophonia, there are a lot of things that I'm aware of that I don't do, right, very intentionally for all 3 of the people that I live with, right? And it's different for different people, by the way, right? So depending on who's in the room, I can or can't do certain things, right? So I try to reduce harm to my loved ones in that way. And I encourage everybody living with people with misophonia to try to reduce harm where possible. And it goes the other way too, which is that the children that I work with and adults that I work with misophonia, also are responsible for trying to reduce harm to their loved ones. And how do they do that? They can't make their misophonia go away. They can't make the trigger not be a trigger for them. But what they can do is learn how to be in touch with what's going on in their body and what's happening with their nervous system, and then be more mindful of their responses, right? So I can't tell you how many parents I've worked with who are telling me that, you know, their child or their teenager can't help it, that they're screaming, hitting, throwing things, punching holes in the walls. And what I say is that, yes, without any type of help, that person has felt unable to control those responses. That doesn't mean it's not possible. So we have to differentiate making the misophonia go away, which is what we can't do, but we can learn how to check in with our body, make a decision about how we're going to respond. So I think the question was about, you know, talking to your husband about it. I think it's acknowledging how hard it is on both sides, right? Because it really is. And giving him a little understanding, which again, I always go to the internet. There are so many good resources now. There are short video clips. There are all kinds of things that you can show to people to help them understand. For example, one of the things I hear all the time is, why is it me, right? Why are they triggered by me? Or why are they only triggered by their sibling? Or, right? Or, you know, I hear they can have cupcakes with their friends, but they can't eat dinner with us, and those types of things. And those things can make somebody take it really personally. And so again, just education, right? Sharing educational information that you can find online, or finding a professional that can have a session with the two of you to talk about it. So you can move forward in the best way possible.
Any other comments on that before we go to the next question?
No, I think that was good. I just spent that last little time trying to answer. There's like so many questions today on the Q&A and they're really good questions. So I really appreciate everybody's participation, and we will have another misophonia clinic in the spring here, but there are so many good questions. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe I'll have to build a Q&A section on the website for all of these questions that people have.
Oh,
If they don't mind it being public. I could build.
But that is a great idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, so then people in the Misophonia Association can answer them.
And email questions as well. I think we're all available on the Misophonia Association website, our contact information. So
exactly.
I'm answer any questions.
Yeah,
also.
but
Yep.
we want to put them somewhere where many people can read them, rather than
that'd be great.
You don't have enough time, Samantha, for the thousands of questions. You'd be doing that full time.
So we have a question here in terms of workplace. I don't know if you guys have additional things. The person is not able to have a job because of their triggers. This is just some coping things that maybe can help. But I don't know if there's any additional things that you guys wanted to add in terms of outside of the home or possibly occupation coping mechanisms, I guess.
I want to jump in there because it is important that everyone here understands that this is a recognized disability, and you have some protection under the American Disabilities Act. You have an accommodation right, but not necessarily under misophonia, because misophonia itself doesn't have a clinical definition yet, nor a code. But you see, this is how it kind of came to the audiologist first, because we do have a code that's called abnormal auditory perception. We have a literal code for that disorder that misophonia can fall underneath. I believe if you go to the psychotherapist, they certainly can use things like, you guys can say, but like anxiety condition or something. You have a pigeonhole you can put it in, right? Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Depends, but yes, always there's something.
I frequently write letters to employers and things that work with them on people who want to work remotely. You know, I thought when COVID came, it would be just terrible for people with misophonia because they'd be at home all day. and they'd be with, the individuals that really were often their original triggers. But actually, it turns out they've rearranged their homes and activities and everything. So now when the push came to everyone come back to work, then I've been flooded with requests to help me stay home. I like it at home. I'm functioning so much better than on those, those big workspaces with 60 people in one room. Those are bad. So you do have the right, and maybe there is some kind of occupation that you could work around and do successfully. I know a lot of our patients with misophonia, I know you too can talk about this too, but they do figure out jobs and work and satisfying things.
I did a presentation on that at the last convention called Double-Edged Sword, and I specifically looked up occupations that are excellent for people who have who want a quiet environment, or people who have a high ability to attend to details, which I think is a very common trait for misophonia, is noticing and being aware of details. And there are many jobs in all different directions where that is useful. So I think it's definitely possible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, computer coding has been a great one for me. I don't have to see anybody. I just talk to a computer and listen to music. So that's always a good one. You can always teach yourself how to code pretty quick and make that a profession. I'm going to go to one of our live questions. I would love for you guys to just touch on this, because there was a lot of questions that were asked in the submission form. And I'm actually writing back to somebody. If you want to see all the questions, they were actually submitted through the Zoom application, and so they're not available publicly. But this was a question that a lot of people wonder, and I wonder if you guys could just kind of touch on it, because I know we can't talk about medications specifically because they're individual based. And do you guys want to let people know, like, maybe where the best place to find information like that is, or something along those lines?
Well, Nate, right now, the situation is that we have anecdotal reports from our patients, our community, people at the convention. There's a number of mood-altering drugs, psychotropic drugs that people will report have some influence on the misophonia. They say it might take the edge off. These things are all over the map, and of course, everyone is different. And we do have our Dr. Jaden Webb, our wonderful Dr. Jaden Webb, who's a psychiatrist who's joined our group, who is part of our Misophonia Association, and who is actively pursuing medical and medication applications, and is publishing and ready to publish more. Up to this point, we haven't really had anybody who could prescribe medications, if you think about that. We just have reports from the people. So now we have this guy that is capable of prescribing whatever he feels might work. And this is a far-fetched idea for all of us, because none of us can do that. And the thing is, physicians, medical physicians, they can experiment with patients. They can say, well, I wonder, maybe this might work. They can prescribe it. Then they watch and see how you react. It's an unknown field. So at least we have him, and I know he's working with this ketamine. And so we're all sort of anxiously waiting for that. Yeah. Other than that, Jolene, do you remember any other thing you could report?
I responded to one of the questions that, so Nate, I'm sorry to hear that. The answers that we type to somebody disappear and nobody else sees them. Is that right? Is that what you just said?
Oh no,
that's what somebody had just written. I'm not sure how they get to see it on the other side, but it's in the answered question section.
Oh, the answer question. So people can see the answers in the answered question section, even though they disappear from the questions themselves. Is that
the open questions? They go into the answered questions.
Okay. Okay, so I did answer that question and referred to Jaden. His website is useful. He talks about misophonia, and he is one of the very few psychiatrists who even knows what misophonia is, and is beginning to do some looking into. He had a case of one. I had a client who took her boyfriend's beta blocker for some reason before she took an exam, and she said, oh my God, it really made a difference in my misophonia, blah, blah, blah. And she found one report online of somebody who had that occur, and it came from Jaden. He wrote up an article about this one person where that seemed to have been effective. Does that mean everybody should run out and grab their mother or dad's beta blockers? No, not a good idea. But he is beginning to look into these things, and we need more people in the psychiatry community who will do that, because, you know, the rest of us don't prescribe medications.
Yeah, Dr. Webb has been a frequent speaker with our monthly live talks on the All Access group. And he's just, yeah, every single time we talk to him, and it's just amazing to hear somebody kind of going outside of the lines a little bit and experimenting with things that could help. So he's been a wonderful talk or speaker. And if you guys go on there, we have recorded talks on our All Access group. I have a question from Lauren, sorry. What advice would you give a parent? So this is going outside of the patients who has not been successful at getting their young teen with misophonia to engage in treatment management process yet.
I just answered somebody asking the same question over text.
I just answered that as well.
Okay, if you guys want to answer it live for the recording, I mean, I think that would be great.
Absolutely. It's a great question and one that I get all the time. So I would say it's about 25% maybe of the families that I work with where the kiddos do not want to be involved. And what I have found is that it doesn't matter at all. That parents get involved, and parents can get some coaching and some education around what's happening with their child and things their child can practice doing, and they shape the environment. So what I do is I teach parents how to shape the environment in such a way so that the kiddos have a motivation to practice skills, right? So for example, right, if children in the car are, let's say, being aggressive with the sibling, right? Because the sibling is triggering them. What we talk about is I teach the parent how to teach that child some skills. And the kid might say, I don't care. I'm not interested in your skills. I don't want your skills. That's fine. Then we just move on to step 2, which is setting healthy boundaries. And so the boundary looks like, I know you have misophonia. It's not your fault that you have misophonia. You can't not feel how you feel when this happens. I get that, and I'm here for you. And at the very same time, hitting your sibling is unacceptable. So I have some things you could do that could help your body feel a little calmer. If you have a hard time in the car, here's what they are. And then we talk about setting the boundary of what's going to happen if you hit your sibling in the car and what's going to happen if you don't. So we build in some motivation for the child to practice some skills so that they don't hit their sibling in the car and they might earn whatever it is in that moment. And then the flip side of that is the boundary being held, which is what happens if they do hit their sibling in the car, right? So we as the parents can shape the environment in such a way that a kid who previously didn't care to use any coping strategies or tools, all of a sudden might say, you know what, I'm going to wear my earplugs in the car because it'll be better for me, right? Because then I might earn X, Y, or Z thing, and I might not have X, Y, or Z consequence happen. And that type of shaping of the environment, what I have found is that it will decrease those really, really difficult behaviors with kids. And it oftentimes will lead the kid to a place where they'll say, okay, fine, I'll talk to this this therapist, right? Because they recognize that these really problematic, out of control behaviors are not going to be allowed, because they're not good for that child either, right? They're certainly not good for the sibling who's being screamed at or hit, but they're not good for the child with misophonia either. That feels very out of control to be enraged and acting out in that way. And I have found that it makes those kids with miso feel bad about themselves, even if they're not admitting it. That's really hard on a kid's self-esteem to be acting out in that way. And so once we set some clear parameters in the family about what's allowed, again, that reducing harm, right? So that the loved ones are trying to reduce harm to the person with misophonia, and the person with misophonia is reducing harm that they cause to the family as well. Things can get much, much better. So again, it does not matter if your kid or your teenager doesn't want to be involved. Reach out for help, find a therapist who knows what they're doing. You can structure things in a way that will improve things. I have had so much success with this. These things, they do get better. They can improve, I promise.
Jillian, do you want to answer anything with that? You guys are busy on the chat right now. I did see.
I would like to comment just after
Yes,
some.
go ahead.
I totally agree with you. It is really push me, pull you with families, and families feel so sad and sorry for their children sometimes that they let them do things that under no other circumstances would the child get away with striking another person or destroying things. And I think there is a fine line there. I'm not a psychologist, but I do think it's an okay thing to say just exactly what you said, which is, with a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, it's very unusual. The most common time onset for misophonia is between 9 to 13. So with the younger children, you have more latitude, but I do like your approach, which is like, you can't do that. We know that. You can't throw rollerblades at your mom when she's driving in the car. Okay. And parents sometimes wonder what to do about that. And it's hard because it's such an intense situation. I always recommend toolkits. Everywhere they go, there's a toolkit in the car. The car is so difficult for these children because they're trapped. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I had a mom come in with the daughter, and it was like, the daughter said, it always bothers me when they eat in the car. And I'm like, looking at the mom, I'm like, why are you eating in the car? Can't you wait? Can't you figure out a different situation? So you kind of identify situations, you give some latitude for both and grace for both sides. But, when you get a bigger kid that has some rational thinking, you have to do, and you have to say to them, you can't throw objects through the windows. You can't chase me around with a tire iron. You can't do these things. There's boundaries on our behavior. And I don't know how you guys do it. I'm not saying I'm not a psychologist, but I support that kind of thinking, actually.
I'll hop in on that. I think one problem for parents is that this is very common. They didn't know that there was a problem initially. The kid was having reactions at the dinner table, and the parents, being good parents who want their child to develop good manners, said, stop that, knock it off. You can't behave like that at the table. You can't scream, whatever it is. The parents applied appropriate comments and discipline, and then later discover that, oh my goodness, there's a condition here. There's a thing going on. This kid cannot help this. They didn't do it on purpose. They're not doing it because they're, bad. And then there's a whole layer of guilt, and the parents are feeling terrible, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and I wish I hadn't done this, and if I had known, I would have handled it differently, and all that kind of thing. And then they go way over to the other end, which is like, oh, I'm just going to have to let it go and let it be, let them do whatever they're going to do. And I can't criticize them, and I can't discipline them. And so it goes way over to the other extreme. And I think it needs to come back to middle somewhere, where it's a matter of, yes, I know you're angry and upset, and I know that this sound is a difficult one for you, and I will do the best I can. We will do the best we can to work around that. You cannot do this thing that you are doing that's harmful to other people as well as to yourself potentially, and set some kinds of boundaries in that way. So totally agree with that.
Wonderful.
Getting close to the end. Are there some
Exactly. I was just going to say, if you guys want to give, we have about 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left. If you guys want to give, maybe we could do one more question and then maybe closing remarks, how to find you guys, you know, your information. I've put a bunch of stuff in the chat, but I'll give a closing after you guys answer. Just one more, which is probably going right along with it, which is, can misophonia cause levels of PTSD?
I would say yes, but it works the other way too. It's very possible that trauma of some sort was what set this off. And trauma can be capital T, something major, but it also can be something smaller that doesn't look like trauma to an adult, but it may be to a child. There may be something that happened that set it off in the first place that people are not aware of. And then because of all the things that happen, it's like an avalanche. Things just keep piling up, and that becomes traumatic in and of itself. So yes.
I would say, I mean, it depends on if you're talking about PTSD in a diagnosable, right, DSM-5 meeting the criteria way, or if you're talking about it in a general sense of sort of how it's used colloquially, right? So generally, it probably doesn't meet the definitions from a clinical perspective because it doesn't involve, you know, death or sexual violation or things like that. On the other hand, the way I think people use it is that there's significant suffering, and then we have an association with that. So in that sense, of course, absolutely, that's what happens, right? That we have such a difficult time in a situation and feel so horrendous, and then our mind associates, right, a particular situation with that feeling. So it can be, right, being in a particular setting at a particular place. It can also be with other noises, right? Like there are some triggers that are triggers really because the brain connects them with the trigger sound, right? They in and of themselves weren't a trigger or aren't necessarily a trigger, but the brain knows what's coming next, right? So, so those types of associations absolutely happen. And it really is probably much more a form of anxiety at that point, right? It's anxiety that I might feel the way I felt before. And that is very real, and I think ubiquitous with misophonia. I think it's impossible to have misophonia without, you know, the brain is very smart. And so it knows, right? Oh, in that situation, this is how much I suffered. This is how painful it was for me. So of course your brain is going to want to protect you from that. So in that way, absolutely, that's very much, I think, the cycle that people get stuck in.
I would say, I would contribute that in my work with misophonia, I have identified the anticipatory phase of the disorder, which is where this child or an adult realizes they're going to be in this situation and they begin to get anxious and worried about it before they enter the situation because they understand what happens thousands of times. And then there's the persistent after phase, and people with misophonia report certain sounds will stay in their brain and echo on for hours. And I'm looking at this as some function of the persistence of auditory memory, which we use for good when we want to remember our favorite songs from high school. I can hear it in my head, but it works in a very negative way after you leave the situation. And I've done some research on this just with my own patients, and they will say the sound will persist for a period of time. And right now I'm trying a strategy using these low gain hearing aids that are Bluetooth, and I'm asking patients in those situations to blast their auditory sound for 30 minutes with a favorite tune to see if they can literally drive out the persistent auditory memory, which is a trigger sound, to see if we can replace it. And the third thing I would just say is, I had something there, it ran away. Let's see. well, it might have to wait till the next seminar, but yeah, this is a real thing. And those are two of my observations. So yeah. Oh, the third thing was I've kept track with people that have misophonia, and I've asked them, how many times do they react to a trigger versus how many times do they experience a trigger? These are two different things. People don't want to have misophonia. They try to stave off the reaction desperately. So I'll have like a teenager put their finger up in the room, and or an adult, and I'll have them just raise it up when they begin to feel triggered by something. And it's rather shocking to watch that finger go up dozens and dozens of times. They're still just sitting there. And so there is a resistance to reacting to the triggers that they don't want to have. They try to not have. They desperately do not want to have. And there's an underestimation, I believe, on the number of triggers that these people experience.
Wonderful. And we are, if you guys want to give, we're out of time today. If you guys want to give any closing remarks for today, we've put all of your information in the webinar chat, not the Q&A. If you guys don't have it in there, please, if you don't mind, Samantha, Jolene, and Dr. Johnson, Marcia, if you guys don't mind putting your information in there so people can get in touch with you. But if you guys have closing remarks, I would love to hear.
I want to say one more time, on behalf of the Misophonia Association, I hope everybody attending today recognizes the high level value of these free, absolutely free misophonia mornings with high level professionals that you may never have access to for various reasons. We made a commitment as an association to bring these 3 times a year so people could obtain information without having to pay money. Not everybody in the world has funds or insurance that covers these kinds of services. I am so proud of us for being able to step forward and say, I'm going to share what I know, and it's going to be memorialized, and you can get to it. And I just pray to God that we can continue on these sessions. And then the convention, don't forget, if you have difficulty with economics, we provide scholarships. We have room for about 150 to 175 people to attend live. And then there's also going to be streaming virtual access. So help us do our work. Send us some money. We like your donations. It's tax deductible. Get involved with us. Get on a committee. Help us. We need people to do outreach because we want to impact the world. We just got contacted by some people in Israel that are forming their own misophonia group. We want them to be involved with us. So get involved, and we love you and thank you for coming. Honestly, it's such a joy, and I hope you got something out of today.
Closing remark. Archie says hello. If you happen to have a pet at home, if you happen to have a dog, you could think of some of the things that we do to assist. The way that this is one of my favorite metaphors, the way that you train a dog. There's nothing wrong with the dog's brain before the dog knows to sit on command. There's nothing wrong with the dog's brain. Just want to change it to add some things and develop some other ways of dealing with a sound, in this case, a command to sit. Think of your own brain like that. There's nothing, or your child's brain, there's nothing wrong with it. It just operates a different way. Hello, pup. Hello, Marcia's pup. It operates a different way. You are a neurodivergent person. That doesn't mean you're damaged. It means your brain operates differently, and you need to find ways to capitalize and build on the benefits of the way your brain operates, or your child's brain operates. There are many advantages. I've never yet met a single person with misophonia who wasn't very smart. So there's a starting point.
I didn't know it was dog show and tell. I would have gone and got my dog next time. I would just say thank you to the association. This is amazing. I'm so grateful that people in the community have this resource and all the resources that you guys provide. It can be so lonely having a disorder that most people haven't heard of. And so what an incredible gift to have these professionals and to know that you're not alone. The thing that I would say in closing is that there absolutely is hope. I have yet to work with anybody who really wanted help and who wanted things to get better and who couldn't get better. It's just not the way that it works. So I would say reach out for help, and you're not alone, and it actually can get better. It really, really can. We see it all the time. So make that distinction between, we're not gonna make it go away. We can make it better. We really can.
Thank you guys so much. I'm actually just grabbing links and sending it to people as well about your guys' contact information. Well, thank you again. I wanted just to say thank you to everyone who showed up today. Thank you for our wonderful panelists today. There were hundreds of questions and you guys did a great job of typing the answers and answering them live. So I really applaud you guys for that. Keep up to date with the events that are going on with the Misophonia Association on the website misophonia-association.org. There's going to be information on the upcoming convention, more symposiums like this. If you guys really, really like this and you guys want to do it once a month, you guys can always join the videos all access group where we meet with a presenter, or we have a Q&A, a one-on-one with all of the different people around the world that are working with misophonia. Samantha, we have to talk. But I wanted just to thank you guys all, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday. And I will see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you, Nate, coming all the way from Mexico.
Well, I wanted to tell you also, I'm in the middle of designing a house at the moment, where we're going to be building a single house that's got a lot of open air, as well as 3 different other buildings that if I'm feeling triggered that I can escape to. So when that's closer to ready, I will present it at one of the conventions about Misophonia Friendly House.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
There was one who had an architectural, there was an article about that. Did you ever see it? Nate?
Mm-mm.
I'll send it to you.
I'll search for it today.
Cool.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I have to go to a charity event now. So
Bye.
thank you all. Bye.
See you next time. About May or June, we'll have another one. Thank you so much, Samantha and Jolene. You guys are just loved everything you said. Just bad.
That was cool. I
All
enjoyed
right.
it.
I'm gonna end it now.
Bye,
All right.
Nate.
Bye.
Okay.